Hello and welcome to Niche to Necessity, your go-to podcast for everything tax and accounting in the realm of Web3 and digital assets. I am Taylor Zork, and every episode we sit down with the top finance professionals and CEOs from the world of Web3 to dissect the latest developments, solutions, and practices and best practices in this rapidly evolving field. Our mission is to demystify the complexities of digital assets and blockchain for tax and accounting professionals. Whether you're deep in the trenches of Web3 finance, or just starting to explore the impact of digital assets, this podcast is designed to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Robbie Heeger, President and CEO of Endaoment, on philanthropy in Web3 and donor-advised funds. So Robbie Heeger is a self-taught software engineer who founded Endaoment, a revolutionary nonprofit organization that is the first community foundation of its kind to be entirely powered by blockchain tech. A veteran of consumer technology applications, Heeger began his career working for Apple's media products division. Looking for more impact-focused manifestation of software technology, he left Apple in 2018 to begin exploring on-chain applications. He soon discovered that the tried and true methods of donating complex assets in the traditional finance world were not readily available to the newer asset classes of digital collectibles and cryptocurrency. What blossomed from that original need to give digital assets is Endaoment.org, the first on-chain DAF provider, so donor-advised funds, built for the next 50 years of philanthropy and wealth management. Endowment's DAF accepts nearly any asset with a liquid market, traditional or gold or digital, and marries their expertise in complex donations with a delightful modern user interface built for the rising generations of families, individuals, and corporations looking to give back. Welcome, Robbie, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Taylor. We're big fans of crypto CFOs and love how deep you guys get into the weeds. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, super excited to give the folks some value and some the awareness of a product that I think will help a lot of people. So if you could just real quickly give us a little bit of background on how you originally got into digital assets, what attracted you to the space, and just, some more clarity on that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it in the intro, but I was working on media products back in the 20 teens, and my passion for rights management, publishing, the media industry was the original hook that got me into crypto, right? This idea of digital scarcity, of digital rights management actually being enforceable on the internet. A lot of the precursors to the NFT boom that occurred in, the early 2020s was what got me on this journey. Now, it is not where I have wound up. I've sort of changed industries in coming to crypto, but the original hook was, I had this roommate who was working for Ripple, and he was a recruiter, and he would come home with his work, and this was just another company that he had gotten placed at, and he came home with his work, and he was like, I don't totally understand this, and can you guys read about it and kind of tell me what you think? And that led me down the rabbit hole. That was like 2013, 2014. Mm-hmm. And I started off as a speculator, as just an investor, as somebody who took, 1 to 3% of their net worth and put it in crypto as kind of like a hedge against the traditional finance system as a long on programmable money, and forgot about it for about 4 or 5 years, and really just fell down the theoretical side, like really was a lurker in the media meets on-chain application space. And then the ICO, cycle hit, and the 2017, 2018 cycle played out. And that really turned my attention to this industry as a space that really needed more robust financial services, that people were running into the brick wall of paying the tax man. And I myself was, had taken some gains and wanted to do what I had been doing at Apple, which was giving some of my restricted stock to a donor advised fund, right? Like I was very lucky to have a brother who was a CPA who was like, you should do this, right? This is the tax savvy move. And I was like, okay, let's open a DAF. So we had the Heeger Brothers Fund at a DAF provider in the San Francisco Bay Area, at a community foundation in the Bay Area. And all of a sudden I had random down market coins that I had huge gains on because I had been, participating in the ICO craze, and I wanted to give some of it away because it really feels like found money.
Yeah.
I think people who have been in the crypto market for long enough have this feeling of like, I took some small amount of money and I put it onto, into this coin, and I put those coins onto a flash drive, and I put that flash drive, in a safety deposit box or my safe at home. And then I woke up 3 years later and all of a sudden it's a significant gain that I have tax obligation on. And how do I both take some of those winnings, take some of those profits, but also how do I like acknowledge the privilege that it was to be early? And how do I try and evangelize for this technology while also mitigating my tax obligation? And that was really the seed that sprouted into Endaoment. So, I had these coins, I wanted to give some of them away. And I think it was Chainlink that I was looking to give away. And it was like during the Chainlink, bull cycle. And of course my current, at the time DAF provider didn't accept Chainlink. They didn't accept BTC or ETH. At the time, like Schwab and Fidelity were barely accepting BTC and ETH. And so that was the spark. That was like the thing that said, not only do we need to be able to give these new assets away, because it helps people manage their tax obligations, but also we need this as a critical use case for this infrastructure, to say that, there's an opportunity to build robust internet native philanthropic infrastructure alongside all of the speculative profit driven financial infrastructure that we are building to upgrade the financial system across the world. And I think that's a really powerful use case for people to get to latch onto as they are trying to explain to their friends, to their family, to their communities, to their government, to their legislators about what the value of this technology is. Endaoment winds up serving this really lovely use case and storytelling narrative for the broader industry, and we're really proud to be able to do that.
I love that. And I love that it fits nicely into what we're trying to do in our community, which is to educate accounting and tax professionals, because what you guys are doing is directly a benefit to tax practitioners that may know how to leverage DAFs in the traditional world, but may not know how to do that, or may not know the steps, or may not even know that that was possible or an option for their clients in the crypto tax space. So just taking a quick step back, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, just so that the audience members who may not be familiar with DAFs, can you just give a little bit more context on that, and just how they may be how they're currently used as a philanthropic tool for tax savings, and how you kind of envision them working with crypto as well?
Yeah, DAFs are really cool. And like nobody knows about DAFs either. Like we'll go to conferences and we'll be like, do you know what a DAF is? And universally nobody knows what a DAF is. And of course, financial advisors, wealth advisors, tax professionals, they know what DAFs are because it's their job. But for, in the same way that people know what a 401k is, or know what an IRA is, or know what a health savings account, or even, like any number of 529 is, right? Like a lot of people know what some of these tax mitigating accounts are, but for some reason, like the DAF is kind of like the forgotten stepchild. And like, it's so cool and it's so powerful. And we think so many people who don't have DAFs right now should have DAFs. So if you've never heard of a DAF before, listen up. Effectively, a DAF is like a charitable checking account. It's not exactly a checking account. It's not your money. You give into a DAF and the money is gone forever, right? You give into a DAF and it's like you're giving to a nonprofit. but you're holding those DAF assets. What you gave to that DAF at that nonprofit gets held in the donor advised fund. And now you have what are called advisory privileges, right? So if you're the donor, it's a donor advised fund, right? So very semantic, right? So you give to a DAF, you are now the donor advisor. You get to advise on how that money is invested until you advise on how that money is granted. And you can do one of two things with money in a DAF. You can grow it or you can give it away. And when you grow it, you make choices about what you want to allocate it to, and the DAF provider provides you with those choices. So they say, here's a library of choices of different investments that you can make with the assets that you've already donated. And when it's time to grant, you create what are called grant recommendations. And those are distribution requests, effectively, where you're saying, hey, distribute $1,000 of my donor advised fund. It's not really your donor advised fund, but distribute $1,000 of the donor advised fund that I am the advisor of, is a more accurate way to say it, and give it to UNICEF. Right. And the nonprofit's job, the donor advised fund provider, their job is to say, OK, did you get anything for making this grant recommendation? And you say, no, I didn't get anything. I didn't go to a gala. I didn't get tickets. I didn't get some, some material benefit from this grant recommendation. And they say, OK, great. They turn to the organization. They say, hey, organization, are you giving anything to the donor in exchange for this? And the organization says, no. No, we're not. This is going to this cause and this cause only, and we're in good standing with the IRS. And once those two things are solved for, the donor advised fund provider will send a check or stable coins, in our case, to the nonprofit. And the nonprofit receives the money, and they've now fundraised for the program. So, like, what does this mean substantially for an individual? Well, it means that you can now separate the how much should I donate question from the where should I give whatever amount I donate in the tax year 2023. Mm-hmm. Right? You can now have a holding cell effectively for your charitable assets. So if you have a big year one year, right? If you make a ton of money one year, that's generally when people use DAFs, is they say, I have more money to give in order to mitigate my tax obligation than I meaningfully know what to do with when it comes to grant making. Mm-hmm. And so what they do is they put a big donation into a DAF, and then they take their time. They grow it over time. They give a little bit out each year. They find some organizations that they want to get involved with. They get involved with them, and then they make some gifts to that organization, right? The DAF is this more flexible way of giving that allows you to make a financial wealth management, planning decision every year about what you want to give, and separates that from, okay, now you also need to decide what causes you're going to support with that gift. And that's really powerful. It kind of makes you like your own. It's almost like a family foundation in a box kind of thing, but with less paperwork and less overhead. And in the nonprofit, the DAF provider, that's Endaoment in our case, right? We're the DAF provider. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we go off and do all the diligence work, all the reporting work, all the bookkeeping, all of the investment management, right? And all the things that you would normally have to hire people for if you were to open a family foundation, right? You don't have to do that with a donor advised fund. And so that's why DAFs are like the most popular giving vehicle in the US by year over year growth. And it's like a $250 billion philanthropic market. Right. So there's $250 billion locked up in donor advised funds. And historically, the largest donor advised fund providers have been offshoots of major brokerages. So people like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, Merrill Lynch, E-Trade. If you can sort of name the brokerage, they have a charitable arm, and that is serving as a DAF provider. And we sort of said, like, well, we're from the internet. And we don't really do the Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard thing anymore. And we want something new that's kind of for people from the internet. And so that was the idea behind starting our own community foundation that is an expert in taking, digital assets, but also is backwards compatible and does all the same things that you would expect from, your normal DAF provider.
Mhm.
And that's really what a DAF is in a nutshell. It's like this way for you to each year, if you are itemizing your tax deductions, you should have a DAF that you give to.
Mhm.
That's what we say. At least it's like best practice, although we don't give tax advice. And, I'm sure there's plenty of disclaimers here. But like, if you're somebody who is itemizing your tax deductions and thinking about tax mitigation and wealth management every year, a DAF is just another tool in your tool belt to help make sure that you're not paying more than you should be to Uncle Sam.
Yeah, we want to be paying only what we're obligated to play in. We don't want to pay more than that, right? I think that one clarification that I just want to understand for my own purposes is when you contribute to a DAF and you mentioned like, obviously in this realm, you could have that DAF invested in Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. Is that tax benefit on the amount you donate at that time, or when you distribute it from the DAF to those charitable organizations?
Very importantly, it is only at the moment of donation.
Okay.
So
To
the way to think
DAF.
of donation to the DAF,
Okay.
right? So when you give to a DAF, you're giving to a nonprofit. That gift is irrevocable.
Mhm.
You can never have that money back. And that is the moment where you get the tax deduction. Everything that happens after that moment of contribution to the DAF happens tax-free. So if you put $1,000 into a DAF and you turn around and you put that into, let's take the traditional finance scenario for a minute, and you put it into SPY,
Mhm.
right? Which is what is the sort of like medium growth option at most DAF providers, is like a ETF that tracks with the market effectively,
Mhm.
right? And that $1,000 grows to $1,500 over the next 5 years,
Mhm.
right? You do not get a new deduction for that $500 gain that is now dedicated to going to philanthropy. That growth just happens tax-free.
Mhm.
Right? So no tax is owed on that growth, because that growth actually happened while the asset was being held by a nonprofit, by a tax-exempt nonprofit. But you, the donor, are only ever getting the deduction at the moment that you make the first gift, right?
Mhm.
The grant recommendation is not a new donation. You are recommending a grant from one nonprofit to another nonprofit.
Mhm. That makes sense. So basically, like it's 12/31, and this may be too close to the deadline, but you're like, I don't know who I want to give to, but I know I want to give, so I'm going to give to a DAF so that I can get the tax benefit and deal with where I want that money to go when I have the time to do that. And then if you donated $100,000 and that grows to $1 million, well, now you've just had more of an impact, and your money, your philanthropic gesture goes further.
That's exactly right. And, it's funny that you should mention 1231, because, we in the crypto space think of time in blocks, right? And I got an email from my previous donor advised fund provider at, in early December that was like, all gifts need to be made by December 17th or December 21st. So most community foundations will say, you've got till 10 days before in order to guarantee that it gets in by the end of the year. We'll take crypto gifts up until the last block in 2024.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and what is so exciting about getting to rebuild this infrastructure from scratch is we're doing end-to-end donations, right? So donation instigation through to liquidation and deposit at the donor advised fund in one atomic transaction. So if you can get that transaction into a block, you've got a timestamp that shows that this donation happened within this taxable year. And like, that's how it should be, right? Like, that's how financial systems infrastructure should work, is that if it's, it's kind of like if you postmark something by election day, like it gets counted in the election, right? If you postmark a transaction, if you get at that transaction mined into a block before the end of the year, that should be a valid charitable deduction. And that's exactly how we operate. And so I think there are big things that we do differently because we're, a smart contract protocol based DAF provider. And then there are little things that we do differently. And sometimes it's the little things that showcase just how big of a step forward we're taking in infrastructure capacity by moving the DAF into an on-chain environment. And so I just love that example. So sorry for the tangent, but
No, I love that. This is why we're here, right? We're here to get into that stuff. So, speaking of kind of like diving into the details a little bit more, can you kind of walk us through what it looks like to set up a DAF, just so that those folks that are maybe thinking about doing it on 12/30 or 12/31 understand maybe what that process looks like, and maybe if they need to start it a couple days beforehand to just get ahead of it.
the good news is like you could theoretically start this on the 31st and get your gift done. Opening a DAF is 3 clicks away. And I encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast right now to just open up a browser, open up a new tab, go to app.endaoment.org, and you can open a fund in 3 clicks. It is super easy. And again, like one of the little things that we do that it just kind of feels like duh, but honestly, like you still have to fax in paperwork at a lot of community foundations these days. You still have to go through additional KYC that's not required legally, but that like brokerages require because they have other compliance concerns because DAFs aren't their main product. So they'll still make you give your social and then go run a background check on you, and you have to wait a couple days, and then you got to talk to somebody, and then you get your DAF. No, none of that at Endaoment. You sign up, you connect with an email address, social media login, Google account, Apple account, any Ethereum enabled wallet we accept as logins, and you provide, some basic contact info, a name for your DAF and a description, click a button, and we actually deploy that contract on base automatically for you for free, no minimums.
Wow. Awesome.
And so like within seconds, you have a donor advised fund deployed on chain that is ready to service inbound assets as donations.
Very cool. So along those kind of following that the discussion through that, when you do create a DAF,
Sure.
what does it look like? Is it sounds like it's a smart contract that is holding the funds that are then kind of distributed somehow, in some way. Can you talk about, like, from a security standpoint, if it is smart contracts, do you guys have audits on those smart contracts? What is the security of this look like?
Endaoment's V2 protocol has undergone 2 different independent security audits.
Awesome.
Our V1 underwent a single security audit. We no longer use the V1 contracts anymore. We use a series of multi-signature wallets and hardware wallets behind those multi-signature wallets to manage the entire endowment protocol. The endowment protocol is a suite of smart contracts. It's basically one smart contract for every donor advised fund and one smart contract for every individual nonprofit. So effectively, what we're building is an ecosystem of smart contract addresses that are serving as like our fund management system for donor advised funds and their recipients. It's really cool because that means all of our activity, any financial and monetary movement of capital, whether on-chain or off-chain, is represented through some on-chain transaction. So we create either a receipt token if you're moving into, off-chain investments for DAF assets, or we are actually holding the underlying digital asset in a 4626 vault that, is a pool that each DAF gets a receipt token for their share of the pool of invested assets that are owned by Endaoment, the nonprofit. And so we're basically using smart contracts as a generalized on-chain custodian and having Endaoment bring its tax status as the administrator of that protocol. So you'll often hear about, protocols have the nonprofit Swiss Foundation that is the administrator of the protocol. They keep the lights on, they keep the thing running, right? They've got some people who are making sure that, all of the contracts are up to date, that they're finding bugs, fixing bugs, doing redeployments as necessary, increasing functionality, so on and so forth, right? That happens at the Swiss Foundation. And then you have the labs entity, and the labs entity is the one building new versions of the protocol, right? The one doing all of the sort of like venture-backed activities, the sales, the marketing, all of the different things that you would expect a software company to do. And they have that two-entity architecture. We at Endaoment have the same thing. We have a labs entity. It's called endaoment.tech, and they build the protocol and license it to the foundation entity, to the nonprofit entity. But in our case, instead of a Swiss foundation, we have a US 501c3 nonprofit, public charity, and public benefit corporation based out of California. So we have added compliance hurdles to go through, as you can imagine, by not housing our nonprofit entity offshore. So we go through extra lengths to make sure that we're meeting all of the compliance requirements of being a public charity and 501c3 in the US. That means we have, more intense requirements around proof of reserves and financial audits. We just finished our first independent third-party financial audit under California state law for the California State Attorney General. It turns out the chain does really good math, and it does it right every single time. We were super, super proud of the results of that audit, and we have some great blog posts about it if you want to read about like more of that. But we also have like a constellation of custodians, depending on what it is we're holding, right? So we very publicly talk about taking in anything with a liquid market, right? Like if you can sell it, we'll take it as a donation, basically. And in order to do that, we have to have a wide range of different custodial options, right? Whether that's Unchained or Anchorage or Coinbase custody, or even, there are basically no other community foundations out there in the world that have comfort with multi-signature wallets, with the ability to self-custody assets, with decentralized exchanges and liquidating on decentralized exchanges, with NFTs and NFT custody, or participating in NFT auctions at different NFT houses around the world. That's required us to build this network of different custodians. So, we use USDC as our base token for the entire protocol. We chose USDC because they're the gold standard in US-based compliance when it comes to stablecoin issuance. We can audit their accounts. We know that they have reserves. They have great resiliency when it comes to DPEG risks, really strong custodians. But on top of that, we have our own Mercury bank accounts that are a part of sweeper FDIC insurance pools that, give us, up to $5 million in coverage of deposits. We have our own insurance requirements, both D&O, and then we are constantly working on, tech and cyber insurance, crime insurance, all those different kinds of things that are commonplace at community foundations around the country, but are not nearly as complicated because they're not holding as complex of assets. And so because we've built this specialty in complex asset custodianship, we've had to build a partner network that enables us to go out and say we can custody those things as a tax-exempt 501c3. And so, whether it's buying stocks and bonds and equities for our traditional investment portfolios for DAF assets at Fidelity, or it's all the way up to us self-custodying Rocket Pool ETH and, offering that as a DAF asset option. We're really trying to build this muscle of how good can we get at complex asset custodianship, and we're even working into things like LP interests in venture funds, S corp and C corp interests, property, real estate, houses, cars, boats, right? Like there's no reason why somebody should get turned away for wanting to give something away. And what that requires is a community foundation that is very comfortable with securing and custodying complex assets. And historically, that's been reserved for the really, really large providers. But because we've gotten all this experience with crypto, it's really taught us how to do this across the entire spectrum. And so happy to dive more into any of those like different risk areas. We also have a great risk framework published on our docs site. If you go to docs.endaoment.org and you click on governance, you can read our risk framework, our controls, and different policies and procedures, our code of conduct, all of the extra layers of security that we have to put on top of the fact that we have this audited, smart contract protocol that involves a lot of people, right? So you got to have the internal controls as well. So there's many, many different areas to risk and compliance, but the 501c3 is our Fabergé egg, right? Like there's nothing to the protocol if we can't give a tax exemption. And so we have to protect that tax exemption, at all costs, basically. And that means being compliance first from day zero. And so we've really taken it to heart and tried to build an expertise in that kind of, custodial security as an administrator of a protocol that necessarily must be a custodian in order to provide the tax benefit.
I love that. And it sounds like you guys are doing a really good job of drawing tech from different aspects of the industry as well, because it sounds like the way that you're describing the way that these donations work from the crypto side, it sounds a little bit like a liquidity pool where you're giving people receipt tokens for their share of that pool or for the share of the assets that they put in as a way to on chain identify, how much, if that pool, were to get distributed, how much of that you're owed. Very cool.
Right. Like there's this feeling of, you go to a community foundation, or you go to a commercial DAF provider like Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard or National Philanthropic Trust or Silicon Valley Community Foundation, or, there are all these major providers. And they're great, like we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? But like their infrastructure is limited in that they don't have that natively transparent capacity, right? You're trusting that they're holding this underlying asset and that they've credited this much of that underlying asset to your account, right? And what we have basically is like qualified custodian best practices, like what does it mean to be a financial institution in the US? It's like, you're segregating accounts, you're, keeping, you're keeping good records, you're doing full reporting and disclosures to the government, right? You're doing all these little things that add up to being a qualified custodian. And our point of view is like the chain helps qualified custodians do their job more transparently, more easily, and with, less trust required from their clients of their capacity to operate in a trustworthy manner. And so it's kind of that like verify, don't trust us state. And so for us to have, if you have the knowledge, if you have the curiosity, if you have the depth, the technical depth to go in and look at the contracts, you can see every dollar that you've donated and how it's attributed and how it's allocated, and that the underlying resource is sitting there waiting for you to claw it back and give it to a nonprofit, right? And that's also big in the world of philanthropy, right? Where people make a ton of pledges, but don't actually follow through on those pledges. And it's like, hey, we've got the receipts. If you give on endowment, you gave.
Yeah.
And we can, like, hey, come look at the chain kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what it means to try and have crypto cross the chasm, right? That's what it means to try and communicate what the value of this technology is in a way that doesn't require any understanding of the underlying technical mechanics of it, is to say that like this helps people be held accountable for the actions that they say they're taking, and to not allow them to take advantage of, the heartstrings of the community by saying, I pledge X dollars and never giving them.
Because people don't always follow up on that. They're like, oh, great, that person is pledging it, but that doesn't mean that actually went through. So that's very interesting. It's, it's again, speaking to the ethos of the tax and accounting professional, where it's trust but verify. I can say I trust you, but I still want to verify under the hood that everything is on the up and up and what you're saying it is. So
well, like one thing, just to throw in another example here, which is like one of my favorite partnerships that we did from last year was directly with Etherscan. And we've now integrated, the entire endowment contract suite into Etherscan and constantly update it. So like if we have public labels for contract addresses, we continually update those in Etherscan. And that means when you go to Etherscan, a third party, right? A third party publicly auditable blockchain explorer, right? And you look at an endowment transaction, you can actually follow the money yourself in plain English.
Mhm.
to see how we are moving it into the hands of the nonprofit. And I think like the prior status quo is comparatively way less sick. Like the prior status quo is pull up the organization's 990, which is their tax filing, and look at their aggregate grant making reporting. So they bundle everything. They don't show you individual transaction level donation events. They just bundle everything. They say, this is how much we gave to this org. This is how much we gave to that org. This is how much we gave to this other org, right? But you can't see this DAF gave this much to this org, and then it moved out to that org, or that org then went and put it and invested it, and then moved it out to their bank account. Right now, there's not that same level of transparency. And so for us to be like really pioneering this idea of transparent philanthropy that's still anonymized by leveraging the blockchain and, a mix of like hashed identities with, labeled contract addresses,
Mhm.
it means that anybody can come and like see for themselves that this philanthropic activity is happening in a way that otherwise you have to trust the community foundation, or you have to trust the government reporting, or they're reporting with the government. And like, we all know that that's pretty slippery.
Mhm.
So I think there's something really powerful and real in moving philanthropic activity on chain, because it gives less wiggle room for people to abuse the system.
Mhm. I love that. And so kind of speaking to this, where do you see the intersection of crypto assets and philanthropy happening, heading? Do you see it, what innovations or trends might we expect to see in the future? And I mean, obviously this is an innovation, what you guys are doing, but where do you see this heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see a crypto native community foundation become a top 10 nonprofit in the United States. There's just so much capital formation that's going to happen around the tokenization of everything that I really struggle to see how, the current, top five, big five community foundations that sit close to or inside of the top 10 of nonprofits by size, in the United States, isn't joined by a crypto native version of a similar kind. And obviously we hope that's us,
Mhm.
right? That would be sweet. That would mean we're doing multi-billions of dollars in grant making, entirely on chain every year.
I love it.
And that would be like just massive, right?
Mhm.
That would be huge.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think that in the same way that we went from offline to online, and the consumer's expectation also went from offline to online, we're going to also see a transition from online financial services to on-chain financial services, and the consumer expectation will follow. And in that regard, I think there's this opportunity to kind of say, like, not only will crypto-based philanthropy, digital asset-based philanthropy start to push up into, significant percentage of total giving market share. Right now it's, single digits or basis points of total philanthropic giving. But like seeing it push up into, competing with traditional asset giving. But we're also going to see, I hope that we will see a large migration of people moving away from more opaque institutions to institutions that are built on community governance and inherent transparency from day zero.
Mhm.
And that will be the disruptive force that drives the transition from online to on-chain. And so over the next 5 years, a lot can happen. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it's just so important that as we make these upgrades to our financial infrastructure, that we also not leave the communities and the organizations that are often left behind in new technology behind, when we have the power to do something about it now.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways that feels like, just on a very personal note, like my fate or destiny, and to some degree also endowments fate or destiny or reason for existence.
That's awesome. It's, continuing discussion on like forward looking. What are Endowment's strategic goals for the next few years? And are there any new features or expansions planned within the platform?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the things that's super unique when it comes to endowment versus other DAF providers is that we're one of very few DAF providers with a full-time venture-backed engineering team working on the underlying technology that's powering the DAF provider, right? Most DAF providers are either entirely nonprofits and don't have the labs entity, or they are, their engineering team is part of a larger brokerage's engineering team, and the DAF is like the last thing they work on. So not only do I like, there are things that we have planned, but then there are also the things that we don't even have planned yet, that we can't even dream of yet, because we're the market isn't mature enough yet for those ideas to blossom. Kind of like Uber before, like before there was Uber, nobody dreamt of Uber. One of the things that I love about what we've done, we have like one of those examples is the universal impact pool. So people oftentimes rag on DAFs for people coming, dropping money off at a DAF and never to be seen again. The money sits there and it never actually makes it to a nonprofit. And donor advised fund providers generally don't have any capacity to like do anything about that. We said that seems sort of silly, right? How can we use the new on-chain technology to create a better end of life scenario for idle DAFs, for DAFs that have been forgotten? And so what we do is we say, if a DAF goes idle for 2 or more years, that we start shaving off of that DAF and putting it into the universal impact pool. And the universal impact pool is a donor advised fund in and of itself. It's actually a community fund. It's got a mission and a sort of stated grant making purpose. So it's kind of like a field of interest fund. And we have it programmatically give grants every quarter based on quadratic matching. So we look at all of the activity, because we have on-chain events for every single gift and every single grant. We look at every on-chain event that happens over the course of a quarter and use that as a voting round for a quadratic match. We literally partnered with Gitcoin to use the same algorithm that powers Gitcoin, GG20 and GG, into the future, Gitcoin grants into the future, and said, okay, let's have that power an ecosystem-wide matching mechanism for all the gifts that are happening on endowment. And that does 2 things. One is it incentivizes nonprofits to do their fundraising on endowment, because the more people who give on endowment, the bigger the match will be from the universal impact pool. And secondly, it incentivizes DAF holders to be active philanthropists, to say, hey, don't get pruned into the universal impact pool. Or better yet, give into the universal impact pool on your own volition, rather than having us trim it for you. And hopefully that will inspire you to do more giving. Because what we know is that when people are more active with their DAF, they're more likely to top it back up. Right? This idea that you only want people to put things into your DAF and you don't want them to put it out is part of why DAFs get a bad rap. And so what we're saying is, like, the problem isn't actually the legislation or the regulation around DAFs. It's not that you need some minimum payout period. It's that you need DAF providers who are incentivized to get paid when money goes out the door. And so the problem's with the model, not with the regulatory environment. And we're really trying to build from the ground up in a way that tries to address some of those criticisms. So, really our focus for the rest of the year is to really make sure people in your audience and beyond know that, Endowment is a crypto native DAF, but you don't have to know anything about crypto to use Endowment. We like to call ourselves boomer proof. Anything your old DAF does, Endowment does. And really what we think is that anybody who cares about the experience that they have when they go to make a grant should consider using Endowment, because it's really one of the best user experiences in the industry. We'll continue to polish that, continue to work on it. And then I think the other thing that's big and down the line is like we really want to decentralize our governance of our board of directors. There's no 501c3 in the country right now using a like token-based electorate body to elect its board of directors. And it seems only natural that we would decentralize our governance in that way and have a decentralized accountability mechanism and continue to decentralize the operation of the protocol itself. So there's lots of progressive decentralization to come, but even before that progressive decentralization, our focus is on making sure that we have a large, sustainable, durable, thriving, independent community foundation that is providing a real service to a real group of clients. And then the decentralization will follow. So that's sort of what's ahead for us.
I love it. And I love the ethos of kind of this, DAO managing things and having that be decentralized. It's so important in these types of ventures because you can really have that much more impact by making it not only transparent, but also decentralized. And I think that it's something that's much needed in this space, and it can also provide a really nice tax benefit as well. So I'd love to kind of close things out. I know I want to respect your time. Just with any final thoughts that you might have, and anything you'd like to share with our audience about the power of blockchain and in enhancing charitable giving.
Well, so everybody who's listening to this podcast either has clients who have crypto or have crypto themselves. And what I want everybody to know is that you should never worry about whether or not you could ever donate some of that crypto to charity. We will find the liquid market for it. Even if it's like pre-launch tokens or venture capital interest, like we are interested in the most creative, most complex donations that people can come up with. And really, we see our niche as complex donations, with our bread and butter being in crypto. So if you can dream of a gift that you want to make, we want to hear about it. And if somebody approaches you with a gift that they want to make, or if they have a perfect DAF asset, keep in mind this conversation and remember that you should never say no to a donation. The other thing I'll say is like, we're really looking forward to bringing wealth managers and tax advisors into a collaborative experience with endowment DAF holders. So endowment will also be unique to your audience insofar as we have new powerful collaboration tools where you can queue up the perfect donation, the right donation at the right time, every time for your clients by getting to collaborate with them in the DAF provider themselves. And so you queue up the right transaction, they go in, one click, approve it. And I think a lot of times when we talk to CPAs and FAs and RIAs and family offices, it's like there's this email thread that happens where they talk about what they want to give. And then hopefully the translation doesn't get lost. And then they give something and it's like, oh man, they gave the wrong thing, right? We are eliminating that. So you should never say no to a gift. And better yet, you should queue up the gifts that you want to give based on what you already know about your client's tax situation. And endowment is really the only place where you can do both of those things. And so we hope we'll see you and your clients with us this giving season, or even before then, if you have a DAF that is already funded at another provider, migrating super easy. But overarchingly, we're really existing just to be the best possible partner for people in your audience to do complex donations.
I love that. And so for listeners that are interested in establishing a DAF or exploring more about endowment, what's the best place or where can they find additional information for that?
The easiest place is our website, of course, endaoment.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Endaoment, ENDAOMENTDOTORG. So endaoment.org spelled out. You can follow us on Warpcast or Farcaster, whatever Farcaster client you use, at Endowment. You can join the channel /philanthropy if you're a Warpcast person. That's hosted by yours truly. And you can always, of course, join our Discord or check out our docs, discord.gg/endowment. That's ENDAOMENT, and docs.endowment.org. So plenty of resources. You should be able to find us. We're also deeply working on our SEO. So even if you're not trying to find us, you should find us. So yeah, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Robbie Heeger on Twitter. at Heegs on Warpcast, or you can email me, robbie@endaoment.org.
Awesome. Well, Robbie, I want to thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I think there's a ton of value in here. And I'd encourage anyone who's been listening to check that out and to start to advise your clients on DAFs and the benefits they can get out of them. And if they're in crypto, this is the place to be in Endaoment. So,
I have one Easter egg. Can I do one Easter egg before we close?
Please.
We just launched an educational website as well. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's called dafsquatch.xyz. So DAF Squatch, SQUATCH.xyz. If you're looking to educate yourself or your clients about DAFs, this is a free resource that we made. It's got a little bit of endowment mentions, but it's mostly endowment agnostic. And it's a great way to learn in a fun way about what a DAF is.
I love that. And you know what, being partners of the Crypto CFOs community as well, we should definitely set up some CPE content as well for those
for sure.
The accountants to get actual credits for this stuff and be able to put that towards their biannually credit threshold. So thanks again, Robbie. We really appreciate your time, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you.